On Friday morning, television crews were out filming images of people who were sleeping on the streets in sleeping bags. Some were in small clusters around tents and camp stoves. But these were not homeless people. We don't allow homeless people to sleep on the sidewalks. Even when they are hiding from plain view, our local police force will arrest them, evict them, confiscate their belongings, and discard them, and even take their pets to the animal shelter where they are likely put down. No, this week the people sleeping on the sidewalks were in line to buy the new iPhone 5. A product with differences so subtle from the last version of the iPhone that most of us would be at pains to meaningfully say how it could possibly be different. Still, the irony present in the fact that you cannot sleep on the streets if you do not have a home and nowhere else to go, but you can sleep on the streets if you do own a home and are intending to buy something. If that doesn't tell you, to at least some degree, to which capitalism has become the real religion in America, you've got to start paying attention. That it is illegal to be poor, but if you're going to buy something, you can do almost anything. I don't say that to be hypercritical of techno nerds. I personally do own an iPhone 4, which I purchased because of the Siri communication feature, only to discover that I can't communicate with Siri any better than I've been able to communicate with any other woman in my life for the past 2 decades. She constantly misunderstands me. And I would even say that I need to put some distance between myself and a lot of my very liberal, tree-hugging, anti-consumerism friends. Because if we all stop buying things and learn to live very, very simply on much less, then the fact is the economy will grind to a halt and the poor will suffer even more. A lot of the hardship we are experiencing across the country right now is a direct result of the slowdown of the economy that has cut production, cutting retail jobs, cuts the state income tax revenue, which forces reductions in school staff and road budgets and layoffs among police and firefighters. Excessive greed and consumerism is part of what caused this economic meltdown. But the other end of the spectrum has its own monsters. No matter what else you might want to say about the infamous dot-com bubble of the 90s, the hyper-stimulated market was directly responsible for an increase in employment and the income of those employed. And under those circumstances, a lot of wonderful things happen that should make both liberals and conservatives very happy. The crime rate went way down, violent crime by more than 50%. Even the abortion rate went down by more than 50% because women who feel that they can't afford to raise a child are not nearly as likely to terminate a pregnancy. Unemployment went down, the numbers of teen pregnancies went down, single-parent births went down, and giving to global charities went way up. A liberal progressive who really wants to see an alleviation of suffering and a raising of the standard of living of the poor needs to take a very sober look at the reality of what a bull market can do if the profits are not being skimmed off into the pockets of the now infamous 1%. But of course, the answer to the poverty issues that plague us today are not nearly so simple as telling people to go out and buy more, consume more, or own more. The sobering reality is that if we want to give more people a living wage and a decent standard of living, then we're going to have to consume less, but pay more for it. And that does not translate well in the marketplace. You will never see a grocery store chain named Pay More, Get Less. Although truth be told, that is what our local farmers markets really are. Buying produce at one of our local farmers markets is good for the environment because you're not transporting stuff using petroleum and stuff over roads. It's good for your health because it's better food. It's good for the local economy because it's paying local farmers, but it forces you to pay an awful lot for apples and onions and squash. You can take comfort in knowing that one of our favorite local musicians, Dallas Jones, is also a farmer. But if you are buying produce from Dallas Jones, you can know that he's not sending his infant children out into the field digging up potatoes and sitting in the basement at night cracking open pecans by candlelight. If you buy local produce, you will have to pay American wages to people who work under acceptable first world conditions, and then you will find out why stuff at Walmart is so much cheaper. Because slave labor is a great bargain when it comes to saving money, but it's not very good for people. If you buy food at Chick-fil-A, you know that you're getting a little hate with your fried chicken. If you buy produce at Sam's and Walmart, which most of us do at times, then you also need to know that someone is being abused on the other side of that transaction. If you're a person of conscience, then certainly in your heart, you want to work to alleviate suffering and to make the marketplace more fair, more just. And if you had, even if you are a hard-hearted, greedy capitalist, you at least want to keep the profit margin at a point where the market is sustainable. Even the most greedy capitalist doesn't want to make so much money so fast that you destroy the market and you have no future. So between liberals and conservatives, there really is a point at which we should be able to communicate with each other about what is generally good for the poor and what is generally good for the investors. It's just that during the dot-com bubble, no one was calling President Clinton a communist. But now, for some reason, advocating for the poor gets you set up to somehow be so anti-capitalist that you must necessarily be a socialist or a communist. It really is a ridiculous and self-defeating way to go about this debate. In our scripture lesson today from James, James is making the eternally true observation that greed leads to conflict, even to murder, he says. This is the first time that Tanner's read, and it was a shame to have him up here to read such a depressing passage of Scripture that you want something, you don't have it, so you go kill somebody. I mean, it may not be quite that tough, and yet, no matter what kind of spin is put on international warfare, international wars are almost never about religion. They say it is, but it's not. And international wars are almost never humanitarian. Almost never. They're almost never about liberation or spreading democracy. There are times when it is. There are times when we have rescued people. There are times that we've used our military surgically to try to alleviate suffering. But when you hear hoofbeats, you think horses and not zebras. Most wars are about money. Most wars are about economics. Most are about driving the market, about profit, and about power. James says that the warfare is within us. We want something, and we don't have it, so we'll do whatever we have to do to get it. If not literally, then essentially. Most of us would be ashamed to wear the shoes on our feet if we saw the conditions under which those shoes were being made. We live with a clear conscience because of what we do not see and what we do not know. But when we start refusing to see, to know, to be informed, then in fact we are saying that we're willing to buy those cheaper shoes no matter what, if you refuse to find out how they're being made. And that is the point at which spirituality enters the marketplace, both the marketplace of ideas and the marketplace of shoe shopping. You've got to be kind of self-confident to talk about Buddhism when you have a number of Chinese professor guests present. The good news for me is they don't speak English, and so they have absolutely no idea how badly I'm about to butcher this, but at the heart of Buddhist teaching are what is called the Four Noble Truths. It's dangerous always to try to sum up any religion and put it into a thimble. But if you'll give me permission to give you a very shorthand version of the Four Noble Truths. The first is that life is full of suffering or dissatisfaction or dis-ease. The second is that our suffering, our dissatisfaction, our lack of contentment comes from our unrealized desires. We have desires for things that we don't get to have. The third of the Noble Truths is that the end of suffering comes from letting go of all desire. If you can stop wanting those things, then the suffering there's a surcease. The fourth point is much more complicated. It's about following the eightfold path, which consists of understanding things correctly, thinking about them correctly, speaking about them correctly, acting on them correctly, finding a livelihood that is not exploitative or damaging to others, making the right efforts in your relationships, and maintaining the right mindfulness and concentration. Now, Buddhism and Zoroastrianism didn't actually have much conversation, but Zoroastrianism sums up the threefold or the eightfold path in three things: right thought, right speech, right actions. And I think it's more or less fair to say that the eightfold path is essentially that. Really explaining that fourth point would take an entire semester, and I teach that course in Eastern Religions at Drury. Unfortunately, the tuition for you is $2,400 a semester, which gets us back to that whole point about greed, consumerism, and camping out in front of the Apple store to get a version of Siri that might actually understand me. The first 3 points are a bit easier, though. When your friend tells you that they're going to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks, is your first thought that you're really happy for them? Or is your first thought a sense of greed or jealousy that you ought to get to do that? You see, letting go of desire, being able to have a balanced approach to life, goes to the heart of the problem between the first world and the third world economies. Would I be willing to get through life with 3 pairs of shoes instead of 15 pairs of shoes if the people who made my shoes got to live in a house and eat every day? If you cannot answer yes to that question, then you need to keep coming to church more often. Finding the right balance to our consumerism that gives others a chance to have a decent life is a spiritual issue. When we can get our appetites under control, then a lot of life factors start to change. Marriages will last longer, children will be better cared for, there will be fewer wars, fewer people who need to sleep on the streets, and more people willing to sign up for my college classes. And that, as Martha Stewart says, is a good thing.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.